Welcome to this quick look at voting systems as part of the Politics and Participation paper for GCSE Citizenship. So when it comes to politics and participation, we should start with democracy. So democracy is a really key concept. It's a key system and it's a key value that kind of builds and is the basis of most political systems. Democracy is the idea that you've got a system of government and the entire population, or most people in that population, choose who is going to run the system. They all have a say, they have a voice, and they can choose who they want to represent them. So this can include things like having election systems, secret ballots. The results reflect the views of the people, and regular elections take place. So this is the idea of democracy. It's a key cornerstone of most systems of government. And when it comes to this idea of democracy, any citizen can stand for election. The candidates can campaign equally without any fear of intimidation, bribery. The media can freely report on the government. It's obviously that freedom of the press element that will come up in life in modern Britain. And the judiciary is separate from the government and citizens. So this will be your judges, your police, and the systems that hold us to account. And when it comes to democracy, the key values within it is that you've got a structural government that operates within the law and morality of society, so it's respecting human rights, children's rights, and the values of the citizens. It is responsible, so we have responsibilities as citizens, such as paying taxes, obeying the law, doing jury duty, but also the people in power have the responsibility to act in our interests. Freedom is a key element as well. Again, the ability to speak and act as you want within the confines of the law, which then links into the rule of law, that we must obey the rules of law regardless of gender, class, equality. Again, an element that comes back to the Magna Carta and 1215's introduction of that document. And equality is a key element of democracy as well. So if you've got all people in society respected, reflected, and able to participate, it also means that you should have a high level of equality. This is why elections are important. The more people that vote, the more voices that are heard, the more values that are represented. So this is some of the key elements of democracy. Now, when it comes to voting, who can stand for elections? If you're going to stand in an election, if you want to be voted as a candidate in an election, you've got to be 18 years old. You have to be a British citizen or a citizen of the Commonwealth. And particularly for general elections, you can only represent one constituency, one part of the country. You cannot stand if you're a member of the civil service, the police, or the armed forces, because again, that's part of that judiciary system. And again, they're kind of not seen to be, they have to be seen as impartial. Same with if you're a judge, House of Lords member, or a director of a commercial company. Again, you're not meant to stand, because again, it's that impartiality that you're meant to hold. You can vote in elections if you are a British citizen or member of the EU. Before we left the EU, you have registered to vote from 16, but again cannot vote till 18. You're not deemed to be incapable of voting, and they're the kind of the key conditions for voting. If you live in Scotland and Wales, you can vote in local elections from 16. You cannot vote in general elections if you're a member of the House of Lords, you're in prison, you have been found guilty in the last 5 years of illegal practice connected to elections, or you've been detained under the Mental Health Act. So they're the conditions you cannot vote. Now, when it comes to voting, there are lots of different systems we use. The first of these is first past the post, and again, it comes from horse racing, that term, first past the post. The post in the House of Parliament is 326. You want to get 326 seats in the House of Parliament, half plus one, to gain a majority. And essentially what happens with a general election is all constituencies, all parts of the country vote for their local MP. That MP is then sent to Parliament. If they win out of their area, they then add a seat to their party. And again, once that party hits 326, they've won the election. Now, first past the post system does then mean that the second party, the second largest party, will become the opposition, and they will be the ones who are primarily charged with holding the government to account. The issue with first past the post as a voting system, is that little image you can see on the screen indicates, is that a majority of votes become redundant. if you didn't back the winning candidate, then your vote doesn't really make that much of a difference. So when it comes to votes first past the post as a system, does encourage local representation. You are sending a representative from your local area to Parliament, limits voter choice and proportionality of government. We will come back to those in a second. Proportional representation is our second voting system, and again, this is a system where a political party is given a percentage of seats in the House of Parliament or in a government system based on the proportion of votes they received in the election. So just looking at this image here, this represents the graph from the 2019 general election. And I haven't got the breakdown of specifics, but the key things to look at here, you can see obviously the blue bar, blue section, that's the Conservative Party on the left, and then on the right is the seats they were awarded in Parliament. So, you know, less than half, I think it's about 42% of the vote in the general election in 2019, but over 50% of the seats in Parliament. Labour stays around the same in terms of that little proportion they've got in terms of votes and seats. I think they had about 40% of the seats and just under 40% of the vote and just under 40% of the seats in the House of Parliament. The biggest difference is this smaller collection of smaller independents, smaller groups. You can see Liberal Democrats, Greens, Scottish National Party. You know, they make up a much smaller proportion of the seats in Parliament, but almost 25% of the votes going to these different parties, but again, far less than that when it comes to seats in Parliament. So these are the kind of benefits of proportional representation. The seats in Parliament represent the proportion of votes people get. But as I say, I will expand on proportional representation in a minute. A closed party list is a system which does encourage more proportionality. It does give a little bit more voter choice than first past the post, but maybe not so much local representation. So the idea of a closed party list is that you vote for a party rather than individuals. So when it comes to elections, you're voting for a party to send to Parliament and government. So it's very similar to proportional representation in that respect. But what happens is obviously the closed party list determines how many members of that party have a seat in Parliament, and the party gets to select which members they send to government. So we did used to use this system for the European Parliament elections. The single transferable vote is our next one. I've moved just over here. So this is where you rank your candidates in order of preference, who you would rather see in place, and then you'll have your second place, third place, fourth place, fifth place even. And what will happen is the process will collect all the votes and they will gradually reduce and remove members from that list until it comes down to the final two, and they use those often to select the final winner. This is used for European Parliament elections. It can be used in Northern Ireland Assembly elections. It's also used for party elections. So if you're voting or the party is choosing a new leader, again, this is the system that will be used there. And last but not least, we've got the supplementary vote. Very much like single transferable, but rather than up to 5 choices, you're really given 2, your first and your second. And again, same sort of thing. Gives a little bit less voter choice because you don't have to rank every single person. Not as proportional in terms of the votes that people receive, and maybe not so much representation because again, you're limited on choices. But again, often used for selecting mayors of towns. That's the method that's applied here. And so finally, just what I wanted to touch on was, I said I'd draw a comparison between first past the post and proportional representation, and again, the pros and cons of each. So when it comes to first past the post as a voting system, the one that we are currently using in the UK, the benefits of first past the post is quite a simple method to understand. Whoever sends the most MPs to Parliament, whichever party gets the most MPs in the Parliament, once they've hit 326, they have got a majority of 50% plus one number of seats covered. They have the majority. They become the government. It usually gives you a decisive result. So the party with the majority therefore takes charge, and is very uncommon to not have one party with an overall majority. Obviously, the coalition government that was formed in 2010 is an example, and to maybe a less extent 2017, Theresa May's general election, in which she didn't quite get to the majority, and the DUP provided the last sort of 9 or 10 MPs to give the majority required in Parliament. Votes are quick and easy to count. They select a winner in one area. That's the thing they're focusing on, and it always gives the winning party a power to make change because they have a majority. The downsides is that it's unbalanced against the national result. So parties may not have a majority of votes in the whole country, but will get a majority of power. So for example, let's say 2019 general election, Conservatives 42% of the power, or votes, sorry, that equated to about 56% of seats in Parliament, and therefore 100% of the power. So it's not a fair representation of actual votes. Less minority parties gain seats using first past the post, so smaller parties don't often get a chance, and it may lead to things like tactical voting, where people may want to vote for a smaller party like Greens, but realise they're not going to win a majority, and so will vote according to who they maybe are least supportive of. They don't want the Conservatives to get in power, for example, so they may vote for any party that may look or have the option of sort of removing them or taking over their position. So that's the kind of the downsides of first past the post. Proportional representation by comparison. The benefits of it is fair and realistic. You get 40% of the votes, you get 40% of the seats. It encourages democracy. Every vote will count. It's going to encourage more people to vote, because whereas in a first past the post system your vote may not matter, 68% of the votes may not be for the winning party, and they don't really contribute or count or make a difference. So every vote will count, and therefore it might be more democratic and also may lead to more voter turnout. There's more choice, because again, no matter who you vote for, your vote will count towards their seats, and again means that preferences can be taken into account. Downsides of it rarely produces a party with a majority. So no one party often gains more than 50%, and therefore there is no clear majority, and it requires more parties to form coalitions or partnerships or cooperation, which can be a good thing, but it also means that it does require a lot of kind of cooperation, which often doesn't occur. Therefore, more chance of hung parliament, leading to coalitions or formations of groups, alliances. It does give extremist groups an opportunity to get into Parliament. So in 2010, around 5% of the UK vote was for UKIP as a party. Now, UKIP got 1 seat in the House of Parliament in that election. If they had been given the 5% of seats they wanted, or they'd won of the vote, that would equate to about 33 seats in Parliament. So again, it would give them much bigger presence and much more power to influence decision making. And it's also harder for politicians to make big, meaningful decisions because no party has majority. There we go. So just to kind of show you the 2019 election, how it may have looked if we'd used proportional representation, again coming back to that idea of no one party having an overall majority, you can see no party would have ultimate power. And again, to gain the majority, for example, Labour and all the smaller parties would have to form some kind of alliance in order to gain an overall majority, or the Conservatives would have to form an alliance with some of the other political parties in order to gain a majority to make decisions and to get votes through. So there we have it. So that is just a quick summary of voting systems. Predominantly you want to focus on first past post and proportional representation, because these two often come up as 8-mark questions or kind of more longer discussion questions about the pros and cons of using each. As always, I hope this helps. Thanks for watching, and take care.